Today we shall discuss the introduction to environmental economics and ecological economics. I had asked Khulana and Susmita to read the first chapter of Kolstad, that is Charles D. Kolstad, and the book title is Environmental Economics. Then read the introduction chapter. But generally, let us discuss, what all issues are covered under this subject, environmental economics and ecological economics. In fact, you should also be aware that nowadays environmental economics is a separate subject, ecological economics is another subject, and resource economics is another subject. So there are three disciplines that has now emerged, and but earlier or even now also in some colleges or universities, this is also taught as a single course. Okay, so but we should know, okay, what all things are there in these subjects. So coming to the environmental economics, again, okay, before we again get into knowing is what is environmental economics, let me tell you also the context in which this has evolved. uh, the student of economics give a lot of emphasis to say couple of things. One is the production and the consumption. Okay? So we assume that either you are a producer or you are a consumer, or you can be both also together. You will be producing and consuming. So, for example, I am now producing some knowledge, and I am also consuming. Okay? I am a consumer of many other products. So, similarly, you might be producing something, but you might be consuming a lot of other things. So, uh, we always assume that whatever is produced is always consumed, or that we call as equilibrium in a market. If there are a set of producers who are producing certain goods and services, there are also set of consumers that are busy in consuming other things, and then uh, we say that whatever is produced is always consumed. That's why there is an equilibrium in the market. Or in technical language, we say that demand is equal to supply. So suppliers basically produce the things and supply all these things to the market, and the consumers demand those goods and they consume all the products and all the output. Now, in this process, when you say that equilibrium is arrived at, there is a mechanism that ensures this equilibrium. Okay, now, what is that mechanism? That mechanism is basically the price mechanism. Okay? Because the supplier produces the goods and incurs some cost. So whenever he or she is willing to produce certain goods, he or she is expecting a price for supplying that particular goods in the market. Okay, so there is a willingness to accept a particular price by the producer, and that's how he or she will supply that particular product. Similarly, coming to the consumer, now consumer is willing to pay a certain price, and that's how he or she is willing to buy certain goods. So basically, you are sacrificing the currency or the money that you are possessing, and in exchange, you are buying the goods from the other party, that is from the supplier. So if uh, these prices converge, then only the exchange can take place. That means the producer is willing to say produce a particular commodity at a price say X, and the consumer is also willing to pay that price, okay, X. Then only the exchange can take place. But now suppose the producer is willing to charge a very high price and the consumer is not willing to pay that price, then the exchange will not take place. So the demand and supply no cannot match, because here supply would be higher because the price is higher, but the demand is not actually up to that level. So the exchange is not taking place. So that means demand and supply are not converging, or the exchange is not taking place, or we can say that there is no equilibrium in the market. So in economics, we always assume that no, this disequilibrium would be temporary in nature. Okay? In the long run, there will be always an equilibrium. Now, why in the long run there will be always an equilibrium? Because if the producer feels that whatever price he or she is charging is high, very high, or higher than what the consumer is willing to pay, then the producer has to bring down the price level gradually so that he or she can sell that product in the market. And that happens naturally in the market. We see that initially the prices might be high. When the exchange does not take place, the seller or the supplier is basically willing to reduce the prices, and that's how the demand and supply convergence happen, and that's how the market equilibrium is arrived at. Now, this is a very simplistic framework, that is used in economics. And here, I did not use any PPT, but remember, we always assume that the demand curve slopes downward, the supply curve slopes upward, and the equilibrium takes place at the intersection point, and that's how the equilibrium price is arrived at. But in general, we can use the logic actually, how price, how the supplier behaves, and how the consumer behaves. So and how the equilibrium is arrived at. But in this equilibrium, there is a problem. Okay, that particularly since we are discussing in context of the environmental economics, no, what is the problem here? We always assume that producer always sells all the commodities, uh, that he or she produces. Similarly, or whatever is produced in the market is sold, okay, or there is a price in the market. And on the other hand, consumer, whatever is consuming, has a price. So he has to pay a certain price, and that's how he pays the price and consumes the commodity. So if for all the goods and services, prices will be available, then there will be no problem, including environmental problems. Okay? But unfortunately, there are so many goods and services for which there are no prices. Okay? For example, now think about the producer. Now, when producer produced a commodity, say think about commodity X, for which he or she is using a lot of inputs. This could be land, labor, capital, and raw materials, any other input that he or she is using. So you are using, say, X1, X2, X3, X4 inputs, and you are producing, say, commodity Y. Okay, and that Y has a price, and that is sold in the market, and that Y is now demanded by another consumer. That's how the exchange is taking place. But now using inputs X1, X2, X3, and X5 or so, it's not that the producer only produces Y. It also produces some other goods or services which are not sold in the market, and that is carbon dioxide or all the pollutants, right? All the pollutants are basically the production, right? The producer has produced all these goods, but unfortunately, that product is not being sold in the market. So there lies the problem. Suppose an industry is producing steel, and so the steel is being sold in the market. There is a price for it, but while producing steel, the steel producer is also emitting carbon dioxide. It is generating a lot of polluted water, and it has degraded the soil. It is creating a lot of noise in the locality, and it is degrading the forest. And these are also products. So that carbon dioxide is an outcome. Water pollution is also a product of the industrial output. But for that product, we do not have a price. And nobody is also willing to pay for it. Nobody is willing to buy this. And that product is also not coming to the market for sale. That's there is a problem. So from producer side, we observed that when you are using a number of inputs and you are trying to produce certain output, you are also producing certain other goods and services those things we can call as byproducts. Okay? But usually byproducts are sold in the market. Okay? So for example, when you are producing sugar, in a sugar factory, there is, you are producing sugar molasses, that is called, and then molasses is used for something else. Okay? So byproducts are sold in the market, but you are producing goods and bads, that we call as bads. Okay? So pollution is a bad commodity, that is a good, that we are telling goods, but we are also producing bads, and for bads there is no market available and there is no price available. And so that is first problem for the producer. Now coming to the consumer, when you think about the consumer, we think that whatever we consume, we have paid a price for that particular goods or service. That's why we are consuming. If we do not pay anything, we cannot consume. Just like now you go to market, now you see lot of rasgullas available in the sweet stall, but then you can only see the rasgulla. You cannot eat unless you pay for it, right? So we believe that the consumer pays a price, and that's why he or she is able to consume that rasgulla. So unless and until you pay for it, you do not get the utility of that particular product. But that is not the case all the time. So for example, Ajitesh is living in Delhi. He is inhaling a lot of carbon dioxide without paying for it, and that's free, right? Similarly, whether you like it or not, you will be infected with COVID-19 virus somewhere. Okay. So there are a lot of consumptions we all do without paying for it. And these are basically the bads. Okay. So all the environmental pollution. Similarly, look at water. Now, you ask your grandfather, they will say that we never carried a water bottle anywhere, because water was so pure everywhere that they could drink water from a pond or from a stream anywhere. But nowadays you cannot do that. You will have to carry a water bottle. Okay. So the thing is that ideally water should be pure and you should drink pure water everywhere. But even if you are not paying for the pollution, you are drinking polluted water. And since you cannot drink polluted water, now you have to buy a defensive good that is called water purifier. So the normal water now that is available in the market is not potable. So we have to use a water purifier to purify it and drink it. Okay. So now this is adding to your cost, because water should be free, but so, and if you do not purify, then you are drinking poison for free. You are not paying for it, but you are drinking this. So for example, in some localities, particularly in mining areas, people get lot of other poisonous things in water. In the tube well, they would get other pollutants. So for example, in a chromite mining region, they would get hexavalent chromium in their drinking water, and that hexavalent chromium is arsenic. So arsenic, that means okay, so that it is actually poisonous. Similar, arsenic is another problem, okay, carcinogenic. So I was telling carcinogenic. So that hexavalent chromium is carcinogenic, that or it can cause cancer. Similarly, in other mining regions, people get arsenic problem. West Bengal or in coal regions, they get all these arsenic problem. So the people living in mining region do not pay for the hexavalent chromium that they drink in the water that comes for free. Okay, so that means the consumers consume a number of bads without paying for it, and that exists in the market. So what we observe, that producers are producing a lot of goods or services, or which is called as bad, for which there is no price. Similarly, the consumers consume a number of bads for which they don't pay anything. And in economics, we call this problem as externality. Okay, we call this as externality problem. Now, why we call this as externality problem because this is external to the consumer and producer and the pricing mechanism, right? So it is not coming in the exchange that is happening in the market. Because I told you, I started with the equilibrium in the market that somebody is producing, there is a price, somebody is consuming, there is a price. So the exchange takes place, there is an equilibrium. But now we saw there are bags produced by the producer for which there is no price, and there are also bags that consumer consumes for which he or she is not paying anything. So these are external to the market system. That's why this is called externality. And the technical definition of externality will be that if the economic activity of one economic agent affects the economic activity of another economic agent without coming into the pricing mechanism, then it is called as externality. So I'm repeating that if the economic activity of one economic agent affects the economic activity of another economic agent without coming into any pricing mechanism, then it is called as externality. So here, suppose the steel producer is producing steel, but he is also producing carbon dioxide that is not coming into the pricing mechanism. And this carbon dioxide is now being inhaled by the consumer who is living nearby that steel factory, and he or she also does not pay for the carbon dioxide he or she is inhaling. So the producer is not getting price for producing carbon dioxide. The consumer is not paying anything for inhaling carbon dioxide. So that means carbon dioxide is not coming into pricing mechanism. It could be positive, it could be negative. If it is a compensation, suppose steel producer produces the carbon dioxide and compensates the consumer that no, you take this much money because you are negatively affected, then it is not a problem. But that doesn't happen normally in the market. That's why you see Ganga is polluted. Everyone is connecting, their STP, that Suez line to Ganga. All the leather factories, uh, all the effluent water is connected to Ganga. Then we do a lot of rituals in our religion, and then we put it in the river Ganga. So that's how it gets polluted, and nobody pays a price for it. Okay. No, jokingly, I tell that if sometime Ganga Mata will emerge from the water and give a slap to the person who is throwing all this garbage, nobody will go and throw it. Or if Ganga Mata would make a counter and tell them that okay, if you want to put your dead body in my water, you have to pay 1 lakh rupees. Nobody will put their dead body in the river. Similarly, from industries, when they connect this effluent water to Ganga river, and if Ganga starts charging this for every 1 liter of polluted water, I will charge 100 rupees. No industry will connect the polluted water to the river. Okay, since there is no pricing mechanism, here Ganga Mata is very generous, okay, and she is not charging anything. That's why we are connecting everything to the okay, so that is why we call this as externality. All the problem that we see, the environmental problem that we conceptualize, or in economics, this is conceptualized as the externality. Okay. Now, when there is an externality, then we have to think about a solution. Okay. So we will discuss all the solution, but then since we are discussing as well what is environmental economics, okay, let us focus on that. Then we'll get into the detailed discussion in other classes. So coming to okay, so now this environmental problem has become severe. Okay, see, up to 1950s or 60s, nobody really bothered about environmental problems because people were so less. In fact, I was listening to the speech of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. So during independence, we had only 40 crore people in India. Okay, and nowadays, Prime Minister is saying 140 crore people. Okay, so within 75 years of independence, we have grown our size from 40 crore to 140 crore within 75 years. So since we are so many on this planet, not only India, look at the world. No, we have now become almost 7.7 billion or 7.6 billion population on this planet Earth. So we are so many, and our consumption is also so high. It is increasing very fast. So what we are doing, we are exploiting the nature, and nature does not have that ability to produce which can really fulfill our needs. No, it can fulfill our all basic needs, but we are not happy with that. We are not happy with a small house. We are not happy with one or two pairs of clothes. So we need 100 pairs of clothes. We need so many cars, as many as we are in the family. So like that our demands have increased so much. Indians are comparing the energy consumption with Americans, and the energy consumption of America is 10 times that of average Indians. So and we say that to be a developed country, India has to increase the energy consumption by 10 times. Okay, so if you are consuming 10 times, your waste generation will also be 10 times, right? So so our production requires more inputs. Similarly, when you produce, there will also be wastage, there will be also be so many bads coming to the market, and there is no price for it. So this causes the problem. Okay, that means our economic activity is the main culprit. See, economists only tell that no, you demand more, that's why there will be more growth. If you do not demand, then there is no growth. Okay? So your demand has to increase every year by 7% or 8%. That's how GDP will grow by 7% or 8%. But if people don't demand, then there will be no growth. And that demand is the main problem here. That it is also producing a lot of environmental waste. So in environmental economics, the subject if you look at, then here we analyze how the economy is impacting the environment. Okay, or we can say that basically the economists are taking interest in the environmental consequences and impact. So that is environmental economics. We want to see the impact, but if you see the impact, then you have to also analyze how to minimize the impact, or what is the optimal level of impact. See, zero pollution is impossible, definitely. There will be some level of pollution, but what is optimal level of pollution? That is also discussed in environmental economics. Now, how do you arrive at this optimal level of pollution? We have to think about two things: that if there will be too much of pollution, then it will be bad for the health of the people. Uh, Everyone will go to hospital. There will be a lot of diseases. Life expectancy will decline, and so on. So too much of pollution is bad. But if you try to achieve zero level of pollution, it is too costly. Okay, suppose in Delhi now pollution level is a carbon dioxide generated every year. Suppose is a 100 ton, okay, in Delhi alone. Now, if you want to achieve say 0 ton of carbon dioxide in Delhi, that is impossible. Okay, because some activity has to happen. So it is impossible to achieve. So that's why I'm telling that achieving zero carbon emission is very, very costly for the economy. You have to shut down all the industries, or if you are allowing industries to operate, you have to use very expensive technologies, which we can't probably afford now, or we don't have a technological solution as of now. So in that case, it is very expensive. So we can achieve we can reduce the present level of carbon dioxide to some extent, but definitely achieving zero carbon emission is simply impossible. So you have to make a balance between these two. Too much pollution is bad for us, so you have to minimize. And but too much of minimization of pollution is very expensive. So we have to have a middle path. Like our Buddha says, middle path. Always follow middle path. So in economics, whenever you think about an equilibrium or optimality, that is basically a middle path solution we try to get. So in environmental economics, we discuss how economy impacts the environment, and then how we can arrive at an optimal pollution level, how to derive this optimal level of pollution. Then to reduce the pollution, what all economic instruments can be used? Can we use a tax for reducing carbon dioxide? Can we bribe somebody to reduce the carbon dioxide? So, for example, bribing means what? Suppose one industry is polluting. Now you have two options. Either you threaten that industry that you shut down because you are violating. That is one option. Second option, you impose a tax that okay, you continue production, but if you pollute, you have to pay a tax. That is second option. Third option would be that you tell that no, okay, you are producing, you are doing a great job because for you our economy is growing 5%, you are generating employment. That is why we are giving you money. You buy better technology to reduce the pollution. That is also possible. So that is basically bribing. That's what I was saying. So either you impose tax, or you threaten, or you bribe the industry to solve the environmental problem. So you can follow any path, right? So that is also discussed. Which one is good, which one is bad, which one is implementable, which one people will accept. So all these things are discussed. So here will come normative economics and positive economics. Normative economics basically we discuss what ought to be. Positive economics is what is, okay, the reality. So we discuss both the normative side of the story and positive side of the story. Okay, but those are all discussed in environmental economics. What should be the optimal level of pollution tax, whether no it should be ad valorem tax or value-added tax, no, how much you are going to tax, how is it going to implement affect the production structure, whether there will be industrial relocation if we start taxing the industries. So all those things are discussed in environmental economics in a nutshell, we can say. Then second discipline which has emerged again from the same environmental economics, no, is ecological economics. Now, what is ecological economics? Now, in simple term, if you want to define ecological economics, we can say that when ecologists take interest in economics, that would be basically ecological economics. So, environmental economics, economists taking interest in the environment is basically studies of environmental economics. But ecological economics is other way around. That ecologists take interest in economics. Now, why actually we say ecologists take interest in economics? Now, think about all the ecological services that we are consuming in our day-to-day life. Okay? Think about the butterfly or the honey bee that the service provided by these living creatures. Imagine, okay, all these butterflies or bees help pollination. Okay? But we don't value this pollination. Pollination happens naturally, we believe, and so we have now used a lot of pesticides and for our farming, and by doing this we have killed almost all the bees or butterflies. We don't see them. So in that case, our pollination is going to be severely impacted. Now scale it up to the world level. Now imagine in the entire world, if there will be no pollination activities by the nature itself, then what will happen? All the production chain will collapse. Production structure will be badly impacted. Now, if production is impacted because of the pollination, reduction in the pollination, which is done freely by the nature, then what so our production is going to be impacted. There will be huge economic loss. So now we are valuing for it. Okay, that no, we need to preserve the bees, we need to preserve the butterflies because they do a great service for us. Now, how will you quantify those monetary value, how will you quantify the services of the bees or the all the pollinators? It is very difficult. But economists are trying to develop some methodology which can quantify at least approximation of these services, approximate monetary value of these services can be arrived at. Why I am saying why this monetary value is important. Some people may say, first of all, why do we need actually this monetary value at all? This monetary value is useful sometimes because sometimes when you have to take a decision whether to keep a forest or clear this, then some people will say that no, see if industry comes, then it will generate employment, it will give so much of monetary value, so people will give all monetary value numbers. So in that place, if you tell them that no, there will be butterflies and bees, people are not going to listen to you. So you need to give some monetary value that this is the service of say a forest that includes the climate control, the air pollution reduction, soil erosion regulation, groundwater table regulation, all these services you have to monetize. Then only people will listen to you. So that is why, or at least we can do a proper scientific cost and benefit analysis. Okay, so that's how we can take the right decision. So in this case, that's why now we are trying to develop new methodologies to quantify all the services that we derive from the nature. Okay? And in this case, particularly in the context of ecological economics, you will need to read the latest report of Partha Dasgupta, that is called Dasgupta Review Report. I have already told Khulana and Sasmita in my last discussion. So I am also telling to both of you that you need to read this. In fact, I have also made a small video on this. Like what is that report all about? This is available on my YouTube channel. You also can watch that particular video. So, and you download that report that is available freely online, and you must read that report. That's very interesting report. This report basically says that see we are demanding a lot of services from the nature, okay, or from the ecosystem. Now the okay, since our demand is much higher than what nature can supply, we are degrading the ecosystem. Now, when you are reducing the diversity of the ecosystem, this further reduces the regenerative capacity. Okay? So, nature's capacity depends on its biodiversity to produce different services. If the diversity reduces, then the production capacity of the ecosystem also reduces, and that we are ultimately doing now. We are extracting so much of resources, we are damaging the biodiversity in different manner. So many species have been extincted. So that is why now ecosystem is no in danger, and that is going to affect all of us. Because if no, say like I gave the example, if pollination stops, similarly, if now all of us face water scarcity because we have cut down all the forests, and similarly, a lot of carbon dioxide increases. Now, Delhi people are now going to oxygen parlors, or in Delhi, at least oxygen parlors have opened, just like beer parlors, beauty parlors, and there are oxygen parlors because people don't get oxygen to breathe, so they have to go to some oxygen parlor. They have to buy air purifier, indoor air purifiers. So those are defensive expenditures. That means even if you are earning high amount of money, lot of money goes for defensive expenditure. Just like we are buying water purifier, now we are going to buy air purifier. Similarly, you have to buy some other purifiers in future also. Okay, so that means our life is going to be very very costly. So these are, so this is how actually in ecological economics we are now trying to understand the monetary value of the ecosystem. Although we may not, some people may say that no, how can we quantify? Because our knowledge is limited, our ignorance about ecosystem is very high, and then ecosystem is also not a stable entity. It is mobile. So fishes will be today here and tomorrow they will be somewhere else. Birds will be available today in Chilka, tomorrow they will be in Siberia. So those are mobile. Ecosystem is mobile. So how to quantify this? A very complex, method. But then we are trying to do that because This way only we can save the ecosystem. Okay? So when you do a cost benefit analysis, if somebody tells you that industry will generate employment and income, then you should also have a number to say that the ecosystem is also generating this much of services, and that's how we can preserve the ecology or the ecosystem and the biodiversity. So that is the study matter of ecological economics. Okay? And there are very rich reports regarding this. Like we had Millennium Ecosystem Assessment uh, that basically developed the methodology uh, how to monetize all these things. Similarly, we have resource economics. Third discipline would be resource economics. Now, resource economics discusses the optimal utilization of the resources. So we can classify all the resources into two categories. One is renewable resource, other is non-renewable resource. Now, when you say renewable resources, that includes trees or forest, fishery, okay, which can be regenerated. Okay. But even if it is regenerable, you cannot eat everything. Suppose there is a growth rate, particular growth rate. Fishes can grow only if you give some time to them to grow. That's why suppose in India we have a fishing ban during a particular month, and because during that month, we fishes basically breed. Okay? So fishes lay eggs, and then that is a breeding season. So unless you give some time for them to breed and again grow sufficient, uh, otherwise you will the fish population will simply vanish. Okay? Similarly, if you catch fish beyond a critical limit, then fishes population will also vanish. Okay? So we have to be worried about that. So what should be the optimal rate of harvest for the renewable sources, be it forest, be it fisheries, or for other renewable sources, even for water? Although water is renewable, it is not a fully renewable resource, because groundwater is a quasi renewable resource, because a part of it is replenishable. Because of rain, it can percolate, it can replenish the groundwater, but not fully. That is how we observe that the groundwater is depleting very fast. Okay? So at what rate we should utilize the groundwater? What should be the regulatory mechanism for the fish population? What should be the regulatory mechanism for the forest? What should be the regulatory mechanism for the groundwater? All those things are discussed. Similarly, in case of non-renewable resources like minerals, what should be the rate of extraction? If you extract the mineral today, it will not be available. See, if you have extracted 1 ton of iron ore today, this iron ore would not be available 5 years later or 100 years later. So, can we leave our future generation poorer than us? If we have enjoyed sufficient amount of iron ore, gold, diamond, or coal, our future generation should also get all that resource, because the planet is not of ours. We are the trustees of the planet Earth. So when we all leave this planet, we have to we have to leave the planet as it was given to us. So we have no right to destroy the resources or leave our future generation poorer than us. So what should be the rate of extraction of the non-renewable resources? Can we use the renewable resources at all? If at all we use, then what should be the optimal rate? So those things are discussed in the resource economics. Okay? The optimal use of the non-renewable sources, renewable sources. This theory would be different for coal, iron ore, petroleum products, and so on. Similar for renewable products, it will be different for different products. Okay. So this is actually basically, no, in a nutshell, what is environmental economics, what is ecological economics, what is resource economics. So in our discussion, we are going to cover some of things from everything. So something from environmental economics, something from ecological economics, and something from the resource economics. So that at least we can be sensible in our day-to-day life, and we can take corrective measures for protecting our environment. so that we leave our planet, if not actually as it was given to us, but at least not in a very bad situation, bad shape. So that would be the whole objective of this course. So with this, I stop here.